Spencer, and this is going to be a lecture about rhetorical tools, logic, and logical fallacies. I'm going to start the screen share over here. Everybody see it?
Looks good.
All right. Exciting. So the first guy that we're going to talk about is the guy that I hate. I made no puppet of him because I hate him. This is Aristotle. Last time we talked about rhetorical situations where you have an audience, an author, and a text. Let's see. And this time we're going to talk about how to appeal to your audience, how to persuade your audience something, how to talk to them. So Aristotle, he said there's three ways that you can do this. If you want to convince somebody to do that, there's three ways that you can do it: logos, pathos, and ethos. We call those rhetorical tools. Somebody's microphone is back or is echoing just a little, so we might want to actually stay muted, sadly. So first one is logos. This is logic. So if you want to persuade somebody something, you can appeal to their sense of logic. So this is evidence, data, observation. There are rules that are established and set. There are things that you can look at. There is evidence. Then we have kind of two ways of doing that. They're a priori and a posteriori. We'll talk about those in a little bit. We also have inductive logic or deductive logic. Math is logical. Experimental research is logical. Graphs, hopefully, are logical. Charts can be logical. To appeal to logos is when you're appealing to an audience's sense of reason. Ethos is authority. This is credentials, trustworthiness. You listen to somebody because they're a doctor or because they have an established history of being trustworthy. To appeal to ethos, you're appealing to that audience's trust of the authority. And we've got pathos, which is emotion. You're persuaded because you feel something. If you're appealing to an audience's sense of pathos, you're appealing to somebody's feelings. So Aristotle was wrong about this. Primarily because logic is the most useless thing in the world, rhetorically speaking. Nobody cares about logic. You can be as logical as you want to, and nobody will ever listen to you or do what you want to say. Logic is literally the least effective way to get anybody to do a single thing. Ethos is not horrible. Ethos is better than you think. I'm sort of a little rebellious, and so I don't like to be told I'm going to do something just because an audience or somebody has authority and they're going to tell me to do that. But it's actually not bad. So let's have our disturbing moment together as we talk about ethos, because I want you all to imagine something for a moment. I want you to imagine a colonoscopy. Anybody ever gotten a colonoscopy before? None of you have? Not even
Sadly,
once?
yes, 2 weeks ago.
Oh, how'd it go?
The prep sucked, but the procedure itself wasn't too bad.
Yeah, do you guys know what happens when you get a colonoscopy?
Nope.
So
my ex-wife had one.
Yeah, it's
So
fun.
I was around for it, but it didn't happen to me, thankfully.
Yeah. So when you're going to have a colonoscopy, you usually get a phone call from a nurse who you've never seen before, and she says you have to do some prep for this colonoscopy. You got to go to the store and you got to buy a gallon bucket of, I had this orange liquid that tasted vaguely like baking soda the whole time, and it's a whole gallon. You got to drink the whole thing. And you know what happens after you drink that whole thing of liquid? You start going to the bathroom. You start going number 2 over and over and over and over and over again until you can't peel yourself off of the floor. This happens all night long until there's literally nothing left in your guts. It's exhausting. And then the next day, you get yourself up, even though you're completely weak, and you take yourself to the office and you meet some doctor you've never met before. And he does things to you. So takes a camera and sticks it somewhere. Now, let's just imagine for a second that you get to that doctor and it's not a doctor's office. It's like you're at some guy's house and he says, "Hi, my name is Brad." Here, this one can be Brad. "I'm Brad." And you're like going into his garage and he's like, "I got a table here." And you've just been through this really harrowing night. And it might look like a normal table and stuff, but how are you going to feel about what he wants to do in his garage, this guy named Brad?
So sketchy.
Yeah, you're going to be a little upset. You might want to call the police, right? It's sort of horrifying and terrible. And really the only difference here, Brad might be incredibly gifted with colonoscopies. I don't actually know that. But the thing is, he doesn't seem like a doctor. Did I actually know that my doctor was a doctor before I showed up at his office? Probably not. Did I look up his medical degree? No, because we're lazy and we never do these things. And so I just trusted because he seems like a doctor. It's like a doctor's office. Ethos is actually really powerful. We believe people all the time because they're in positions of authority. They seem like they should know what they're saying. And so we're like, yeah, I trust you. So ethos is not bad. It's not a bad way to persuade people things. But the most powerful rhetorical tool that we have is pathos. If you want to persuade an audience something, you have to appeal to their sense of pathos. You have to make them feel something. Pathos is so powerful that it's basically the only way that you can persuade an audience to do something from a rhetorical perspective when we're talking about just with words. This is a major problem for scientists because scientists have these jobs that are dependent on logic. They're dependent on reason. They're dependent on evidence. They need to persuade you based on data and facts. And that can be hard. Let's read this. Who wants to read this sentence for me here?
I'll do it.
Do it.
It's a terrible sentence.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah. I poured acid on my cat's skin and she screeched.
It's distressing. Yes. Sam, you're here. How did that sentence make you feel?
Icky.
How are you feeling, Sam?
A little disturbed. I mean,
Are you a little
and
disturbed?
it's not a fun sentence. I didn't like resonate with it. I didn't go, yeah. I also poured acid on my cat's skin.
It doesn't inspire empathy. No,
Not
does
really.
it? No, let's read another sentence, though. 15 milliliters of H2SO4 was applied dermally to a feline, resulting in vocalizations of 10 megahertz.
Hmm.
How do we feel? Ileana, how's that sentence make you feel?
Animal.
I don't care. I honestly just feel a little bit bored.
Exactly. When you read science, it sounds boring, right? If I tell you that I poured acid on my cat and she's screaming, you're horrified. You're feeling something. You're not going to listen to anything that I have to say to you because I am clearly a psychopath who does bad things to cats. But if I tell you that 15 milliliters of H2SO4 was applied dermally to a feline, resulting in vocalizations of 10 megahertz, it's designed so that you don't actually feel anything when you hear it. You can listen to it and you don't have feelings. And if you're not having feelings, you can be logical. This is why scientists do these things. When you read science that's written for other science, it sounds really boring. And that's on purpose. It sounds boring because that way you can be logical. It's hard to be logical. We're not logical people. Humans are messy and we feel things all of the time and we can't stop feeling things. And if we are feeling things, we're not doing anything. So how do we take a sentence? how do we take a sentence and take it from I poured acid on a cat who screamed and turn it into something else? There's a couple of things that are going on in that sentence. One is the passive voice. What is the subject of this sentence? Can we see it? Do we know who is pouring acid on this cat?
Not really.
We don't. Yeah, we don't have any idea who's pouring. Maybe it's, the neighbor. Maybe it's somebody that is disturbed. Maybe it's, I don't know who. Maybe it's a dog. We don't know who's doing it, and that's not actually very rational for us to not know. If we don't know who's doing something, how can we evaluate if they're doing it right? It's not very logical to not know who is performing an action. It's not very scientific to not know who's doing what for what reason. But we might say it this way. We might say it this way because it de-narrativizes a sentence. If you have a protagonist of a sentence, if you have a subject of a sentence, somebody doing something to somebody, I am pouring acid on a cat, then that's a story. And the human brain is hardwired to respond emotionally to stories. We also got quantification here. 15 milliliters H2SO4. Those numbers help because then you start thinking about numbers. We also have Latinate versus Germanic terms. So what is the difference between a feline and a cat?
Feline sounds like a more broad, generic category. It's just like a kind of animal, not like a specific creature.
You don't have a pet feline, you have a pet cat.
You do. And this is a question of connotation. Connotations are the way words are used. And some of these words, the way that they're used, has a really long history. So what do we know about the Norman invasion of 1066?
It brought a lot of French words into the English language, a lot of Latin-based words into English.
Very good. Before the Norman invasion of 1066, we were speaking a form of English that was Germanic. This is Swame. This is something that we would have a lot of Germanic roots in there. So that's what everybody's speaking. And then we have the Normans that come invade us, and they're speaking this form of like Proto-French. So they bring all this Latin in there, but they're the ones that are in charge. They're the ruling class. So we have two words. Language is like, it's not like one language sort of took over the other. They both kept existing. You have both. So now English is not Germanic and it's not Latin. It's both Germanic and Latin. And we have something totally different that we had before. We have Middle English, that experienza non autoritaria in this world direct enough for me, speckle woe kind of English, which sounds, when you look at it, it looks a lot more like modern English, but it's part Latin, it's part Germanic. Now, the Germanic people were conquered by people speaking this Latin language. And so we start to have two words for things. And when we have two words for things, one of them is fancy and the other one is not fancy because the ruling people are in charge and they're the fancy people, and the peasants are the Germanic people speaking this old English. And so those are the not fancy ones. They tend to be words that are much more connotatively rich. And this is the part where we all get to swear. Everybody put your favorite swear word into the chat. Some of these are new. Good, nice. Yeah, my favorite is definitely fuck. It's just incredibly satisfying to say. It's that labiodental fricative followed by that glottal plosive, like it's just very satisfying for one. This is a Germanic word. If we were to look up what the Latin version of that word, it would be copulate. Is copulate fun to say as a swear word? No, it's not really fun at all. And same thing with like shit. That's a whole lot more fun to say, and just to say like in a bad way. But if we looked up the Latin version, it would be defecate. Defecate is not nearly as fun. All of our swear words are the Germanic versions of words that were Latinate versions, because the Germanic version is the dirty version. This is the word of the peasants. These are the conquered people, the Germanic people. And so all of the things that they do tend to have much more connotatively rich. When you say fuck, it has a whole lot more connotations and a whole lot more emotion to it than when you say defecate, not defecate, that's the other one, copulate. So we have our inventors of modern science who are getting together and they're making rules for things. And you know who those people were? They were big fat snobs mostly. We talked a little bit of last time, so we have Newton last time. One of the things that Newton did, he was like, if you are too dumb to know Latin, then you have no business listening to anything I have to say because you're just going to get it wrong and you're going to take it some bizarre place anyway, and I don't even want you touching any of it if you can't already speak it. And so they started they're like, well, we are the fancy people, so we're going to use Latin terms because that's what educated people do. We use Latin terms. It becomes the language of science. Well, it has this added benefit in science that it has words that are not as connotatively emotional. So you can talk about a feline without feeling as much as when you talk about a cat. A cat lives with you. A cat sits on your lap. A cat is something that you pet, but a feline, that's something different. It's a word that we don't use in that context. We don't have the same feelings about it that we do about a cat. One weird exception for this that I've seen in scientific literature is that dogs, for some reason, they always talk about them in terms of dogs, and it's strange. So, lest you think this example is extreme, my students are always doing strange experiments and things. And one time I had a student that came in and she was like, all right, well, we're studying depression. And I said, how are you studying depression? And she says, well, first thing we do is make some mice depressed. And that was kind of alarming to me. I was like, how are you making the mice depressed? Like, that just seems very sketchy. And she's like, well, we make them depressed. And then we give them an antidepressant and see if we make them less depressed. I'm like, okay, that's fine. How do you see if you make them less depressed? And she says, well, we get a big bucket and we put water in the bucket. Here's this water. And the bucket has really high sides so that if you have a mouse, and here's our mouse, and you put him in there, he can't get out. So he's stuck in there. So we've got a mouse in there and he's stuck. And we time and we see how long does it take that mouse to stop swimming. And if it's swimming and it keeps swimming, then it's not depressed. And if it stops swimming and it's struggling, that's more depressed. And if it just gives up and floats, then that's really depressed. That's what you do. That's the most depressed mouse, is the floating mouse. And I just looked at her and I was like, excuse me, you did what? You did what? And she's like, yeah, put a mouse in a bucket. So I tweeted about this. And I was like, they put the mice in a bucket and they just let them swim. And they're just like, when they want a time to see when they give up. Terrible. It sounded terrible. I was horrified. It sounded like torture. Well, a scientist from Yale is one of my Twitter followers. And she was mad at me. And she was like, Kerry, how dare you say it this way? You are misrepresenting the scientific process. You're making it look terrible. And it's not terrible. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but the way it was explained to me, it sounds terrible. It's awful. And she was like, no, it's not terrible. And so she started arguing with people on Twitter, because that's what we do on Twitter. We get into fights. And she was trying to explain logically why it was not terrible. Why did we need it? How it was not cruel. She was not working, and she kept using logic. And she kept giving evidence. And she kept being really rational. And she was a scientist from Yale. She had authority. She had logic, and it was failing. My Twitter followers were just railing on her. I felt pretty bad. Until one moment where she stopped and she says, I understand. And I think about the mice too. And actually, I say a prayer for them every time. And that was the point at which my Twitter followers went, oh, that's actually really sweet. And we love you and we forgive you. Because when you talk to a lay audience who is not full of scientists, you have to appeal to their sense of pathos. And this is something that's hard for scientists, because when you talk to a scientist, you get into the practice of being logical. of doing everything that you can to keep your audience from feeling something, because that's the only way to be effective in science, because you need them to be logical, and you can't have them feeling things. If they are feeling things, they can't listen to you, and if they can't listen to you, you can't persuade them anything. But when you're talking to a lay audience that doesn't know these conventions, you're never going to be successful talking to them that way. It's not going to work. So the secret word is bloviate, which you will all need when you take the quiz on this, by the way. There will be a quiz. So let's talk about logic specifically, because we want to know a little bit about logic, because it's important. And all of our science is being evaluated by logic, and this is what we are trying to get our audience to understand, is this logic, what we're trying to rely on. So we've got two kinds of knowledge, a priori and a posteriori. A posteriori is knowledge that is dependent on experience, and a priori is knowledge that's independent of experience. And that roughly corresponds with two types of logic, which are inductive logic and deductive logic. So inductive logic is the cornerstone of the modern scientific method. This is, if I need evidence, I gather it myself. I do a study. I get data. I have primary research. The upside of inductive logic is I don't have to trust anybody about anything. I can just do it. Newton loved inductive logic. Newton was obsessed with inductive logic. Newton was like, everybody needs to stop with all of your postulating all of the time. Stop guessing things all of the time. So if Newton wants to know how gravity works, he's going to climb a tree, and this is an apple, let's see, and he's going to like drop it, and he's going to time it, and he's going to see how long did it take to fall. This is inductive procedure. If we want to know something, we go and figure it out. If we want to know whether or not the earth is round, we go up in a spaceship and we look out the window and we say, oh, wow, there's the earth and it's round. Incidentally, I did grow up in Houston, and I went to school on NASA 1, a block away from Mission Control. I know astronauts, and they told me they've been in spaceships, and I think that I trust them. I haven't personally been in a spaceship, so I don't know. The weakness of inductive logic, on the other hand, is that you can do it wrong. So if I'm Newton and I'm climbing up in my tree with my apple, that is a potato, maybe I'm going to drop it, or maybe like I'll accidentally like throw it a little, and it will change the result, right? This happened, something like this, not with an apple, but this is Dr. Doris Taylor. This is my Dr. Doris Taylor puppet. I made a puppet of Doris Taylor because I love Doris Taylor, unlike Aristotle, who I hate, so Aristotle gets no puppet. So Doris Taylor is a heart doctor, and she was studying stem cells. And she wanted to design an experiment to study stem cells, but stem cells are hard to study because if you want to like create an experiment on something, you have to have something you can test so that you can see if it's working or not working. You need a control group. You need to have like your cells marked, and these are cellular things. They're tiny things. If the stem cells are working, how can you tell that the stem cells are working? Like, it's not like you can stick a dye in them and then look at somebody's heart and see if it's glowing pink now. No, like it doesn't work that way. And so she's like, okay, what we're going to do is I'm going to use the sex chromosome as a marker. And I'm going to take male stem cells and put them into female mice. And I'm going to take female stem cells and put them into male mice. It's very simple. She's going to track the chromosome marker. If the hearts end up having chromosomes of opposite sex in them, we know that the stem cells have been incorporated into the heart. Very straightforward. Well, stem cell research up until that point had really stalled. Like, it seemed like it was going to be so promising. It seems like there was so many things that were great about it, and it should work. Like, you should have these stem cells that could theoretically become any organ. They should be able to repair things, and they'd had so much trouble trying to get this to work, and they didn't know why. Well, they did this experiment, and something very strange happened when they did the experiment. All of the female mice died. They just died. And all of the male mice got better. Like all of them. And they went, wait, what? They were very confused how this happened. Anybody know anything about the sex of lab animals? Like 99% of lab animals are males. Why? Well, because it's assumed that the masculine experience is the generic experience of people. If you want to study people, then you study men because it's generic. And also, if you study women, things like hormones mess up your data and they get all in there and they skew it. So the best way to study women is to study men because you can just have the same thing. So they only ever study men. This is a problem, correct? This is a bias. This is a bias that caused stem cell research to be stalled for 20 years because they didn't make the connection that none of their experiments were working because they were testing men. They were testing male mice, and they should have been testing female mice because the female stem cells were the ones that were effective. We can do inductive logic wrong. There's a million ways to do inductive logic wrong. Our inductive logic is limited by our resources. It's limited by our time. It's limited by our bias. If I don't have a spaceship, I can't go up into space and I can't watch and see if the Earth is round. If I don't have the right sex of mice, it doesn't work out for me. Deductive logic. I used to hate deductive logic. Like, it made me mad. Mostly, I think that was just because I was doing proofs at the time. And, like, I don't know if you guys have had to do proofs. Any of you had to do proofs, like, in your calculus class?
I hate proofs.
They're the worst.
I hate doing them.
They're awful. And they make me have bad feelings, and I don't like them. And so I always hated deductive logic. But then, like, I went through this phase where I'd been taking, like, English classes for a while instead of math classes. I studied both chemistry and English as an undergraduate. So I would have phases where sometimes I was a science person and sometimes I was a writing person. And I was a writing person this one semester, and I think I had a breakup, and it was, like, really emotional and traumatic. And so I went and started doing derivatives, and it was soothing because it was like, no matter what you did, it was the right answer. Like, scientists think sometimes what they do is hard, but it's not hard because you get the right answer. If you do it right, you get the same answer every time. This is deductive logic. Deductive logic is math. You borrow somebody else's evidence. If I'm Newton and I want to know if my apple, actually it's not Newton, because Newton had to do the inductive logic. So once we've established something through induction, we trust it. That's what Newton says. Oh, I threw the apple. That's why I'm looking for it and I can't find it. It's way over there. So if I'm Leibniz now, who was born way after Newton, and I want to know how fast something is falling, well, I have a formula now that's been established by experimental procedure. So I can get out my book and I get the formula and I'm going to take my little animal and I'm not going to throw her, but don't have to throw her because I am calculating it. I've got the formula and I can look it up. I can do math. Math is pure deduction. Descartes loved deductive logic because he's like, it's beautiful. All pure knowledge is deduction because it's the same answer every single time. And we love it. But what is the problem with deduction?
You have to be able to trust your source.
Right. If they're wrong, every single thing that we do is wrong. And I hated this part of calculus until I loved it when they made us do the proofs. You guys remember axioms? What are axioms?
It's been a long time. You're gonna have to remind me.
Yeah,
I don't blame basic mathematical law.
So it's
like,
the assumptions that you start with, right? You assume certain things are true, and then you move on from those.
Can we prove that they're true?
Generally, no. You can change them and get whole new worlds of mathematics, is kind of the fun way to look at it.
So we based all of our mathematics, all of our deductions, all of our laws on these axioms that by definition we can't prove. And this is the flaw of deductive logic. If our axioms are wrong, if our assumptions are wrong, everything we do after that point is wrong. All inductive logic relies on our resources and our ability to see our own bias, which we're very bad at. All deductive logic basically asks us to take things on faith. Really, when it comes to truth, what is truth? We don't have truth. We don't really care about truth. We have what's useful to us. And that's the weakness of deductive logic. So they're both good and bad for various things. And we use them for various things. If we do them wrong, we call that fallacy. Now, both kinds of logic are great because they have rules and they have procedures and things that you can do right or wrong. Our three basic types of fallacy all have to do with evidence. We've got fallacies of insufficient evidence, fallacies of irrelevant evidence, and fallacies of faulty logic, which is conclusions not supported by evidence. There's like a million fallacies, and these are just a couple that we've got. And I gave you Latin names so that you can look at them and be like, I know the Latin name. And because if you're in a fight on Twitter and you start using Latin names for things, you just win. I think that's a rule. Like that's like the default rule. So one kind of fallacy that's an appeal to ignorance is, one is insufficient evidence is appeal to ignorance. So this is when you say, I don't have any evidence of something, therefore something else. This is a logical fallacy. So Leibniz did this. We talked about him last time. We talked about what he did last time. He says he's the child of the age of reason, and the world has become reasonable, and everything has to be reasonable. Even God has to be reasonable. God goes through like the most boring phase of all of like God history if you read like the religious text from the 18th century, because he has to be reasonable. Reasonable gods are very boring, and I really did not enjoy that class. But so Leibniz is a child of the age of reason. Everything has to be reasonable. So he was like, when I was dumb and young, I used to think that it was possible that there could be such a thing as an atom, but it's not reasonable, and we have no evidence of atoms, and it's not reasonable to believe in something without evidence. That's what he says. Well, the problem with this is obviously that we do have atoms. Atoms exist. We just didn't have the resources to find the evidence for those atoms. So that was an appeal to ignorance that he did as a logical fallacy, and he didn't quite catch it because he was very caught up in the idea of reason. He was probably emotionally attached to the idea of reason. Oh no. I almost hung up on you all. That'd be sad. Another one's false cause, insufficient evidence, that you assume that just because something followed something, that the first thing caused this. Sometimes we also talk about this in science as correlation is not the same as causation. Two factors might be related to each other, but they doesn't necessarily mean that one causes the other. If I wear really ugly, stinky socks to a basketball game and then I win that basketball game, one event preceded the other. It doesn't mean it caused it. To assume a causal relationship is, you don't have enough evidence to assume that. You need evidence of a mechanism before you can make that sort of assumption. Hasty generalization is another one of these. Hasty generalization is when I have not enough evidence to say something. So I have an irrational dislike of physics majors. Are there any physics majors here? I'm sorry if you're here and you're a physics major, because I don't really like them, and I don't have a good reason. I've only met like 2 physics majors in my whole life that I like. And so I dated 2 physics majors, and both of them was not good. That's all I'm going to say. So because I dated 2 physics majors, I dislike all physics majors on principle. Now, this is a hasty generalization. This is bad logic. I don't have enough evidence to dislike all physics majors because I don't know all of the physics majors. But because I've done that, that's a hasty generalization. So that's one kind of logical fallacy there. Another kind of logical fallacies category we have is irrelevant evidence. We see a lot of these. So you have evidence, but it's bad evidence. The argument to the person, bandwagon, red herring. So argument to the person, you have all done this before. You're in a fight with somebody and you're going back and forth and they're winning and you know that you're losing the fight. And so you just break down and you're like, well, you're ugly. And you smell bad. You've done it with your sibling before. I know you have. Well, this is an argument to the person. You assume that something is about somebody, and it doesn't have anything to do with anything, but it's irrelevant. Another kind of irrelevant evidence is the bandwagon. That's just when you assume that something is true because it's popular. And red herring, this is when red herrings are interesting. So the way that red herrings often work in a rhetorical sense, and the things that can be effective in a rhetorical sense are not necessarily things that are logical. And we do have to make that distinction when we talk about this. Because say that you're in a debate and you don't want to answer a question. And so you bring up something controversial that has nothing to do with anything. But if somebody doesn't answer the controversy, they look bad. And if they look bad, you've won. So people do this all the time. It's a distraction. They don't want to talk about something, so they throw in a distraction and they make you talk about something else. And if you don't talk about it, you look bad. And if you do talk about it, you've been derailed. It's a way of controlling a debate or an argument. It's a way of controlling the rhetoric that's happening and something going on. So it's effective rhetorically. It's just not logical. It's not logical to switch gears that way. Our last category of fallacy that we're going to talk about today is faulty logic. We've got begging the question. We call this sort of circular logic. This is when our evidence is the same as our conclusion. So abortion is wrong because it's murder would be sort of an example of this, because all murder is wrong. You could say there's justifiable killing. You could say there's justifiable something else, but murder is always wrong. So you're essentially saying something's wrong because it's wrong. Circular logic. False analogy, you compare two things that are too dissimilar to be compared. It's like when we have our mice that are male mice and we're trying to decide something about how the stem cell works and we need female stem cells. These are too dissimilar to compare. That's bad logic. False dilemma. This is one that my kids are very good at. My daughter in particular was always really, really good at this one. I have a picture of her. She was like a very scrappy child. Let's see if you can see this picture of her. There she is. When she was little. Yeah, she like never liked her hair, so she would cut it. She would like get into strange things. She always had something strange on her face, like it was always stained somehow. And she always called me out on my false dilemmas. So I would say to her, like, you can either go on timeout or you could come here. And she would look at me and she'd be like, a third option is I could run away. And she'd like run away, scream. And I'd be like, okay, great. And I'd ask her, like, what's your favorite Sesame Street character? And she'd be like, well, I said, is it Elmo or is it Big Bird? And she would just shake her head and she'd be like, Cookie Monster. There's always got to be a third option. I learned to use it against her when she was young. At a certain point, I said to her once, I needed her to wear an outfit for a picture because the family had done like matching outfits or something. Grandma picked it out and she had to wear this certain outfit that Grandma had. And I knew she wasn't going to want to wear it because it was not her style of thing. And so I took it and I put it on the bed. I laid it out. And I said, well, Lily, you have two options. And I got two different outfits out from her closet. And I said, you can wear this outfit or you can wear this one. You can't do anything else. And she like got really frantic and she looked around the room and she saw the outfit on the bed that I had put there. And she's like, or I could wear that one. And like in my heart, I was like, oh no. And I was like, I win. Finally I win. Yeah. So false dilemma is one. People say you only have two options. It's almost never true. It's not logically true. It might be true in terms of like power or politics, but it's not logically true. There's almost always a third option. We've got non sequitur. This is when our evidence does not match our conclusion. It might be good evidence. It might be something that's really useful, but it doesn't have anything to do with what we're saying. So those are some basic fallacies. They are all somewhat useful to read, and they're also sort of useful to keep aware when you're looking at any piece of rhetoric, is that you can identify fallacies. You can identify when logic is being used wrong. But you always have to remember, rhetorically speaking, when you're talking to somebody, nobody cares about the logic. Logic is least effective. People are human, messy bags of feelings who are just feeling things constantly. And that is going to change the way that we write. It's going to change the way that we talk to scientists. It's going to change the way we talk to non-scientists. And yeah, I think that's all. Anybody have any questions? You have a question. What's your question?
Does using the false dilemma against your daughter in that way technically qualify you as a Sith Lord?
Yes. Yes. Other questions? All right. Thank you all for coming today. I'm going to stop the recording.